haven't gotten an alert about it or anything. There we go. Live.
Yeah. Okay.
Terrific.
Ta-da.
Well, it's nice to see you. Great. It looks like folks have gotten notified already. It's nice to see you. And it's nice to see you looking so well. It's been about a year since we last did a live cast together, and I thought we had some unfinished topics to catch up on and touch base on. And you've been up to some amazing stuff. I've been up to some interesting things. So I was thinking that maybe a fun format that we could do would be to kind of like interview each other on how the last year has been and what sort of stuff we've been up to, and just that might be a neat way to catch up. So um, if that's all right with you, maybe
Yeah.
I'll kind of start first. And I've been reading your writings all about being a guest lecturer at the University of Austin. I'd love to hear more about that, not just what it's like to be a lecturer, but like the day to day of the campus. Like what's the vibe like? How many people are there? You know, there are lots of college campuses that are filled with like hippies banging around a hacky sack or something. Is that what it's
Yeah.
like, or is there like a
Mhm.
totally different vibe on campus? That's what I would love to understand a bit.
Yeah, I think it's a very different vibe. One thing is that the clientele generally come from families that are willing to opt out of normal schooling. So one student told me today about 1/3 of the students were homeschooled. Another third went to private school, and a third went to public school. So it's a different clientele. I describe them as bright, hardworking, very entrepreneurial, and overextended. I think this is true in general among sort of highly motivated freshmen, not just at UATX, but at other places. Uh, it's like they come in and they want to do everything as freshmen. They do, they their eyes are very big relative to their stomachs. Um, so there are only about 120 students there.
Oh,
Um,
small.
yeah, small. The class sizes are small. I mean, a big class would have 15 students in it. Um, the um,
With
Most people,
120 students, you can't. I mean, there can't even be that many different classes because
right?
there wouldn't be
Exactly.
enough
Yeah.
students to fill them all.
Yeah. Although when Tyler Cowen came and gave a guest talk, he pointed out that you could teach anything you want. If a student says, "I want to learn about Tudor England," just tell them to go to do an AI and have the AI produce a syllabus for them and everything. Um, so
But
that
then
that
they don't need the university to do that. They could just. I mean, you could do that
well,
anywhere.
yeah, the idea is that some faculty member would sort of provide some kind of
Hmm,
guidance. Maybe the
I see.
faculty member isn't an expert on Tudor England, but they have a good sense, something useful to offer. But that's just a point about AI in general. Is
Mhm.
what is a university for in that world? And maybe it's for all of things that have nothing to do with transferring knowledge, but have to do with, you know, social activities, growing up, whatever, who knows? Those questions I think are just going to be raised. But anyway, sort of on a day-to-day basis, the students get very active in discussions. Today, I just was talking about the effect of AI on education. We were talking a lot about K to 12. People are familiar with something around here called the Alpha School, which has been using an AI tutoring system for a long time. And, so there are lots of arguments about what's gonna happen with that. So I had a very lively well, it's that Alpha School is very controversial, and we got
I'm
a lot of
surprised to hear
discussion
you
there.
say that it's controversial. I would have thought that the same group of people who opted out of traditional educational paths that you described earlier would be 100% bought into Alpha School and would be all in on that.
Well, some of them are, and I
Mhm.
have in another class of mine, I have a couple of Alpha graduates who are very, pleased with it. But um, some of the questions that get raised are, is it's too focused on teaching uh, to test metrics,
Mm.
things like SATs and so on, or is it not? And also, you know, they're they're so non-traditional that students haven't read a book or been assigned a really long essay, like a 30-page essay or something. I may be misstating, but I think that's right. And um, so anyway, I don't think. So anyway, the two alpha graduates in my class are certainly more than holding their own. So
Mhm.
uh, I think there's the you know the question people raise is, does it work? Can it scale? Can it work for every student? So let me just give some people, in case they're not familiar with, some background. The Alpha School is a K to 12 school, and they're setting up branches around the country. The model is in for the first 2 hours in the morning. You're As a student, you're sitting in front of a computer, which is a very personalized tutor that is taking whatever level you have at basics like reading and math and tries to raise your level as fast as it can. And
It's
it
not really
seems
AI. My understanding was that it's more adaptive than AI. Like, it's not generative, it's just
it's not
adaptive teaching.
right. It's not contemporary AI, and I actually
Right.
wonder if you want to reverse engineer it with the latest AI, what you might be able to do it pretty quickly. Um, they spend but they
Great
spend
point.
years working on it. It's based on their research into learning science, uh, and applying that. Um, so so that's the first 2 hours. The rest of the day, if you're in elementary or middle school, they do life skills, which parents really love. Their kids are learning to cook or budget or whatever. And then in high school, they're doing projects, and projects are supposed to fit the students' aptitudes and interests and so on. And the adults are not called teachers, and they're not from a teaching profession necessarily. They find that some of the best guides, as they're called guides,
Mhm.
not teachers, are um, come from like an athletic coaching background, so that they're good at motivating students and keeping them on task. Because both in the morning and the afternoon, there can be slippage. So in the academics or in the non-academics, there can be slippage, and the role of these guides is to stop that. So the upshot of it is it's actually a very expensive model. It's not a cheap model, even though you have the computer doing the tutoring. Um, so anyway, that's it. It's a very interesting model, and um,
Do you feel like being a lecturer at
I wouldn't call
University of
myself a
Boston?
lecturer because I
Okay,
just
a
professor,
visiting
a
a
visiting,
professor, a
yeah,
visiting professor.
yeah.
Okay, so do you feel like being a visiting professor there is different than being a professor at a different school? Like you've taught before, does this feel not just the student body, but does the act of teaching feel different there, or the campus life feel different in a way?
Um, I think the main difference has to be the students that
Hmm.
um, you know, they're on the one hand very bright and catch on to stuff really well, on the other hand overextended, so that if you want to, ex- you know, exert a claim on students' time, you have to be kind of aggressive about it, and I don't like to play that game of sort of competing for student bandwidth. That
Hmm.
to me is the a bit frustrating. I wish they had enough spare time so that they could really take advantage of things that, are not important necessarily for a grade, but just interesting things that I throw out,
Hmm.
that I toss at them. It's
Is the
um,
grading scale the same as at other universities? Like it's a 4.0 scale?
they use number grades, and they're very strict about telling you to keep the average close to 85. So,
Okay, so there's a curve.
yeah, yeah,
That's interesting. I mean, that's bold of a school to do as a startup, because you might have some students who are going to be frustrated and say, "Hey, I'm taking a chance on you, and then you're screwing me by not giving out softball A's," or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah. Well, but the school's very upfront about that. I think
Mhm.
on the flip side, the school uh, hands out internships and opportunities to meet interesting people
Mhm.
like candy. I mean, there's just um, there are kids who have gone to Bastrop, where Elon Musk has the Boring Company, and have kind of spent days there. There are kids who've worked at the Alpha School. There are many students who've started their own businesses. One guy has raised millions of dollars for his business and is still trying to do a full-time workload. Um, so, um,
It's
they're
impressive.
yeah,
And
it's
that's compelling, right? I mean, it that, mitigates the risk of taking a chance on a newish school.
yeah, no, you'd much rather
You can't do.
would you rather have your foot in the door at a corporation, or have raised venture capital and not have a certified degree, or would you have a certified degree and be nowhere in getting a job?
Right, right. That makes sense to me. It's very interesting. I mean, I think it's a compelling value prop. I'm not sure if it's so like, I guess those early graduates have to be compelling as hires in order for the model to perpetuate
Yeah,
and to keep growing. And then for people to want to say, yes, let's throw more internships and more opportunities at this cohort of
yeah,
people.
and I think that is working, and I think
It's
it
great.
and, I think the best salesmen for the school are the current students.
Hmm.
So they'll send, when they do road shows, they'll send current students around. And my personal prediction is they'll have an easy time meeting their sort of quota for next year, which is to basically double the size of the school, bring in 125 freshmen, whereas now they have combined about 125 freshmen and sophomores. So there'll be an invasion next year.
Is
And
it mostly men, or is it a split of men and women? I could see this being like 95% men, and that
no,
wouldn't
no.
surprise me.
I think it's a majority men, but not a overwhelming majority. It more looks more 60-40-ish to me, but I don't have actual numbers.
Hmm. Interesting. Um, so, one of the things last year when we did our webcast, we were talking about our predictions for 2025. And one big one that we talked about at the time was about interest rates. And we made a bet. We bet lunch on where the 10-year government bond yield would be at the end of 2025 versus the point it was at when we had the call, which at that time it was 4.19%. I found one source that says it ended the year at exactly 4.19%, which would make it a push. So I'd still love to buy you lunch, but it sounds like neither of us was right, and interest rates ended the year exactly where they were when we talked. Are there any economic predictions you're thinking about for this year? Things that have surprised you in the last 12 months, or things that you're thinking about for this year?
Well, I think the future of the economy is just tied to what happens with AI. Um,
Hmm.
so the technology itself, I think, has exceeded my expectations in terms of how fast it's gone and how far it's gone. The uh, the impact of the economy is going to be, I think, quite delayed relative to uh, what some certainly what some people think. Um, but that's really the big question in my mind for the economy is how quickly will the economy adjust? Um, you know, I've got to believe that entry level white collar jobs are going to be on the low side. That if you're an investment banker and you're sitting there and you know that if you get on one of these AIs, you can get a complete report on a company in, a couple hours with a couple hours worth of work versus having to, spend hours and days training a human, a new human to do what you want. Uh, you're just not going to do that. There's an essay today by an academic, a guy who's I think in the information sciences part of the business school at the University of South Florida. And he says, I used to need I used to have PhD students to do sort of, what you might think of as, grunt work or whatever. And it says, I just couldn't spend the time to train them anymore because I can
Hmm.
do this on, do this using AI much easier. I can train the AI to do it much more easily than training a human. And I'm waiting for that to hit law. I mean, right now, some lawyers are telling each other, "Oh, it's too risky to use AI. You can't use it yet." I think it'll hit pretty quickly. Where why go through the process of training a junior person in law when you can get the research that you want and the background information so much more quickly using AI.
I think the counterpoint to that has stuck with me is if you think about one of these professionals, the if if they use AI to its fullest, the productivity of each of these people goes up, which means that the return on investment of each person you hire should go up, right? They previously were producing X amount of work, now they're producing 2X. And so each person is therefore twice as valuable. And if you have assets that you can buy more of or less of that are now twice as valuable or twice as productive, what are you likely to do? I mean, I think the natural answer then is to say you'll buy more of them, right? If these assets are generating
That's
twice the return, invest more in that.
Yeah, well, that's a way to think about it. Now, and it could be that the junior hires are actually more productive than the senior partners, and that
Mhm.
that would that would be a different form of disruption. Um,
You could
I
also
can see
have
that.
changes in the billing model too, right? Where instead of hourly billing models, you start to do just either a fixed fee or more fixed billing models because hourly is no longer as relevant in a context where you're not using that many hours, there may just not be enough dollars to support an hourly billing model. But if you're doing it based on an outcome based uh, billing model, then that maybe you just bill for outcomes instead of for hours worked.
Yeah, so it takes time for those kinds of things to work their way through a system. So I wouldn't necessarily say that 2026 is the year you're going to see AI making a big imprint on the economy because there are all these institutional factors and habits that you have to get around, and maybe the way you get around it is with disruptive new competitors entering, and
Hmm.
then they in turn have to convince existing institutions to try something new.
I have a suspicion that we're not quite there yet. That I think um, it's not so much hallucinations, right? That was the thing that we heard a lot about from AI in like the what I might call the previous generation of LLMs, right? Everyone would
Yeah.
complain that they were hallucinating. I don't think they do that quite as much. I don't think they're also. I also don't think they're necessarily generating insights in the way that you might expect them or hope that they will eventually. And if you're hiring, whether it's an investment banker or a lawyer or some other highly compensated professional, you're not hiring them for the grunt work. You're hiring them because of their insights. And I think that you're not quite at the point yet where you're getting insights from those tools.
Well, I'm going to push back on that because, first of all, you have to take into account that the sort of pro versions of these tools give you quite a bit more depth and
Right.
analysis, and then people on top of that. Um, uh, I've talked to one entrepreneur, and I call his application Nasty McKinsey because it gives you a McKinsey analysis, but instead of sort of, you know, sucking up to the current CEO, it sort of says, this is really what where your corporation is really vulnerable.
Hmm.
And this is what you're not talking about internally. Um, and I mean, I'd say pound for pound, the insights from that uh, that tool are better than what you'd get from
Maybe.
any human.
Right.
It's so you just need, don't underestimate these things. Don't underestimate them in terms of creativity. Well, that's another one of the last stands people will take. And
Right.
my line is that creativity is just putting things together and reaching the adjacent possible.
Hmm.
It's not some magic.
Totally.
Somebody in the year 50 isn't going to invent the automobile. They
Right.
they don't have the internal combustion engine and all these other things to
Right.
to do that.
I think that makes sense. Look, I'm very, very optimistic on the technology. I am, and a frequent user of all the models from all the different companies, and I have pro subscriptions to everything. So, I've tried out everything. I find a couple things I think they're great for helping craft an email and maybe doing some research on a topic, but I haven't yet been blown away where I'm like, oh, this is ready to be an investment banker yet. Like
Right.
I don't see it there. It could be in 6 months, but I don't see it yet. But maybe. We're certainly it's like it's on the path to that right now. I think one of the things that we lightly touched on a year ago that I think a lot about is um, there was a there was a very interesting interview uh, where someone named Benedict Evans was interviewed by Ben Thompson about a year ago, and in the interview, Benedict Evans made a couple of interesting points. One of them is that if you think back to the way we have used computers for like the last 40 years, it is purely determinative. And we've used computers to provide right answers to questions, right? What is 3 plus 3? Like Microsoft Excel can do that perfectly every single time. And it's great at that. But we are now asking AI to answer probabilistic questions like what should I bring to the picnic? And there is no right answer to that. Because, like, you could say 99% you should bring a basket and 98% you should bring a blanket. But you could also say, like, 0.001% you should bring a machete. And that's not necessarily a wrong answer, even though it's an improbable answer. And so, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot in my work is that enterprise users are having a hard time figuring out how to adopt AI because they're used to using computers for deterministic questions and they're not used to using computers for probabilistic questions. And so I think that's been an obstacle to driving adoption. And I think another obstacle, which Ben Evans also pointed out, is that the way we see AI now, it's like, what do you want to do today, right? If you open up ChatGPT, what do you want to do today? That's not really when you don't know how to ask probabilistic questions, that's not really a helpful product interface because it doesn't give you a hint. And if you think about Microsoft DOS 40 years ago, you had to know exactly what to write to get the useful thing out of the computer. And it's kind of like that now, or at least it echoes in that at this point. And the switch to a graphical interface was like it was ideas, it was suggestions, right? Should I click on email or should I click on
Right.
word processing? Those were suggestions. And we don't really have those. I personally have a theory that there are two categories of AI companies right now. One of which is the infrastructure layer. So that's the folks like Gemini, OpenAI, Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, the guys who are making the foundation models that underpin this. And then there are what I would call wrapper companies, which are the industry specific offerings that are targeted at a specific thing, right? So it's AI for investment bankers, AI for consultants, whatever. It's AI for a thing, for a job function, and it has prepackaged use cases for people in those industries to utilize. And I think what those prepackaged use cases are is they're the same as like the icon on the computer that says email or internet. It's a suggestion so that you can figure out what to do. But the business model of these wrapper companies is they're buying tokens from OpenAI, they're buying tokens from Anthropic, and then they're reselling them at a markup of like 500%. And I just don't think that is a super sustainable business model unless you have an amazing sales force or you can sell these tokens with like a really long-term contract.
Mm.
Eventually, the lawyers and the bankers are going to figure out how to ask all these questions themselves, and they're not going to rely on the wrapper companies. And so I think those are some of the companies that are likely to get disintermediated at some point. And that's one of the things that I've been seeing in the AI market.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the user interface question is to me a big one. Like, just in terms of coding,
Mhm.
like, you know, there's one view that well, people be able to vibe code. The coding language is going to be English. And yet, in the last couple months, the people who claim to be most impressed and most productive are really professional software developers
Hmm.
who are uh, taking advantage of this stuff. So that's um, I think of the main advantage of these things as the ability of the computer to understand English, but uh, in a way that's taken a step backwards. I mean, yeah, you have to talk about people working with a command line interface, which is like, two generations before Windows. It's strange. Um, where I think it's most likely to help is in robotics. So
Hmm.
the being able to talk to a robot
Interesting.
without using code, I think is going to be pretty important.
Hmm.
Um, so I think it's possible that robotics will take off and make a difference before all these fancy white collar applications really penetrate.
Mm. That's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought that much about the robotics implications of it. Uh, I think partly because the robots themselves seem so far off to me. Like I get it that there's a couple of cool prototypes out there, but they feel still so far off to me that the yeah, we may accelerate it a bit by having this better interface with them, but you still need robot. Like I don't
Yeah.
know anyone who has a robot in their home.
Yeah.
And
Well, and there's a question of, which path will will work. The path of a humanoid robot where you try to get it to be as dexterous as a human, or the path of um, eh, just a machine that can do certain tasks really well, but doesn't generalize to a human. My instinct is the latter is a lot easier. Let's
mhm,
say you wanted to automate dishwashing in a restaurant. Well, just build something that can, grab dishes really well and do things like that. Don't try to build a human. But other people make the point, well, the kitchens have been designed with humans in mind, so design something like a human. So, there are both sides of that argument.
I think one of the reasons I'm slightly bearish on the robotics question, or at least think it's still a way. It's not that I'm bearish on it. So I think it's like a ways away. Is like I don't know when the last time you tried to use Amazon Alexa or even just Siri on your iPhone.
Yeah.
When's the last time you tried to use Alexa?
Well, I don't have Alexa. It's
Okay,
interesting that one of the online trade magazines said that the first OpenAI hardware is going to be a speaker with a camera, which
so I've heard. I've
sounds,
heard the speculation. It's possible.
but that doesn't sound very exciting to me.
I think there's a lot of folks who have an Amazon Alexa in their house, and it stinks. Like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say at least 50% of what you ask, it glitches out, right? You know, Amazon play the Foo Fighters or whatever. There's a 50% chance it gets that right. Or just starts talking about nonsense. It misunderstands what you're saying. And I speak pretty clearly. Like there's no, well, it can't understand my accent. Like I just it's I think if we can't get that right, I think the bigger use cases of like I need a dishwashing robot in my house that I can program with an LLM that's not happening in 2026 or 27. It's probably not happening for 5 years at least. Maybe longer than that. Not because it's the combination of the hardware and the software interface are just it's a ways away, I think. So I think it'd be great. I'd love it. I'd love to buy one. I just don't see it happening so imminently,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Um, one of the things that I've spent a lot of my time on in the past year is I brought on a new client about a year ago. It's an AI startup, and um, so here's an interesting thing I've realized about a lot of folks who know a lot about AI don't realize that the T in Chat GPT stands. Well, I'll just ask you first. Do you know what the T stands for in GPT?
I thought it was Transformer.
You're right. Okay. You've beaten my expectation on that one. Do you know what a transformer is or how it works?
I think of it as some sort of matrix algebra, and that's about it.
Yeah.
That's about as far as
So
I get.
the thing about transformers is they're great at certain things. They have certain deficiencies. And one of the biggest weaknesses of a transformer is something called the quadratic attention bottleneck. And the quadratic attention bottleneck is a problem in which transformers, I'm going to oversimplify slightly, but they can't natively keep track of the order of words in a sequence.
Actually, excuse me,
Which,
I'm gonna try to
that's right.
do this on my computer because my
Sure,
phone is losing battery,
that's fine.
and so I'm gonna take it off the phone, see what
Do you
happens.
want to try to join on the computer first, or do
Let's
you want to?
um,
We lost Arnold. Let's see if we get him back here. Well, thanks for your patience in the meantime. Let's see if we can add him back here. That's a good idea. Maybe I'll do the Jeopardy music. I had that in my head the other day. Actually, I was at the gym and I couldn't stop humming the Jeopardy music to myself. So thanks for that suggestion, Steve. Now I'm going to have that in my head. I wonder if you run into copyright issues if you start doing too much of a snippet of that music. I wonder if we can we let's pull in let's see if we can pull in someone else in the meantime. Um and guess. Let's see. Let's see if I can pull someone else in here. There we go.
well, but this is still the
That's
phone.
still your phone, huh?
Yeah, it's in preview mode on the computer. Maybe if you I wonder if there's something we can do to get it onto the computer.
I'm not sure. Can you plug in your phone in the meantime?
It is plugged in. It's just syncing. It's just it's discharging faster than it can recharge.
Hmm.
Oh, all right. Well, let's just talk on the phone and
We'll go as long as we can. Um, so what I was saying about Transformers is that essentially a transformer can't keep track of the order of words in a sequence. And so what that means is if you think of a very simple example like dog bites man and man bites dog, it's the exact same words but in a very different order. And they mean very different things, right? Just by flipping those two words
yeah,
around, they mean very different things, obviously. Um, because a transformer can't natively keep track of that, it has to waste a huge amount of its tokens on memorizing the order of tokens in a sequence. And that is a very inefficient process. It's one of the reasons why transformers are so intensive in their use of GPUs and electricity is because of this issue. And as the length of words in a sequence gets longer, keeping track of the order of them goes up at a quadratic rate, which puts a very high demand on transformers. So it's one of the reasons why there are a lot of folks hard at work trying to come up with alternatives to transformers. But every alternative that's been created so far has some other key flaw that is somehow worse than what the transformers suffer from. One of the interesting things that I've been spending some time on and in the past year is a startup that has built an alternative to transformers that does not suffer from the quadratic attention bottleneck and also does not suffer from any of the other problems that all the transformer alternatives suffer from. And the result is that their models can achieve output comparable to a transformer, but with 93% fewer GPUs. So that's been very exciting for me to be like on the front lines of that. And it also makes me then think about how much other technology are we going to develop that's going to replace the current generation of what exists, and how meaningful could that be? Is that where all the future step changes are going to come from?
Yeah, well, you know, I'll believe that one when I see it. Um, and meanwhile, the moats that the larger models have developed probably have a lot to do with um, their reinforcement human learning, whatever, or
Right, the
reinforcement learning
reinforcement
rates.
learning. Yeah,
Yeah. And so they're probably going to outperform your startup for a
right,
long time until somebody buys your startup and
right.
adds
Integrates that technology. Yeah.
adds the training, and I'm sure there are a bunch of other little tricks that
Hmm.
these models have.
I also I also wonder, are these companies, is their advantage from distribution, right? They have brands and they're in front of people and people know to go to ChatGPT or go to Gemini. Is anyone else going to be able to break into this space without having some major breakthrough that gets them there? Or is it
Mm.
just going to be so hard to overcome that branding?
Yeah, my guess is it will. Uh, the classic theory of disruption is you come in at the low end, so maybe, but that would be these sort of Chinese open source models. The problem
Mhm.
is that right now, the cost to not being on the frontier is really high. I mean, the non-frontier models are really stupid compared to the frontier ones,
Right.
and as long as that's still holds, it's going to be hard to disrupt.
Right. No one's going to want to use a model that isn't the most cutting edge one. They want to
Yeah,
use the most cutting edge. It's a
yeah.
great point. Um, so before we lose your battery, any besides just sort of the bigger prediction about AI, any financial predictions for the coming year that we can roll
I think,
forward on?
well, again, I just think it all depends. Like uh, if AI penetrates well and accomplishes its potential, then things like even the budget deficit become less of a worry,
Hmm.
um, and the top line GDP numbers will start to look really good. If it And if it doesn't, I don't think it will be so much the fault of the technology, but the fact that uh, it just it's just very difficult for institutions to adapt and take advantage of it. I'll throw out the example of universities. I mean, there are many more faculty that would like to ban AI than would like to use it, which
Is that really
is
true? You think that's the case?
I think that's true in general from what I read, and that's sort of scary. Um,
Because they think students are using it to cheat on a test kind of thing?
Yeah, it's
Why?
like, let's, if I'm a faculty member and I say, well, I've been teaching a certain way for years, and now I can't, so this is bad. I mean,
Mm,
that's about as far, or they try a non-frontier model, they see it hallucinate, and they say this is bad, or they say technology in the classroom has not been good, smartphones have been bad for people, so this is bad. There's just a lot of that. Just as a little bit of an anecdote, so here in Austin, what do? You go to concerts, right? It's a thing to do. And when the artist makes and Austin's a very liberal city, by the way, especially the people who go to concerts. It's an older crowd. I think young people go to comedy
mhm,
routines and older people go to music concerts. But either one, anyway, so you go to this concert and you've got a demographic of people in their 50s and older. Um, and the artist makes a crack against Trump. They get some applause. They make a crack against ICE. They get some applause. They
mhm.
make a crack against AI. They get wild applause.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So I think there's a ton of pushback there. There are a lot of people who want to fight AI data centers and stuff. So um, yeah, um, that's out there, and so yeah, if you get outside of a narrow circle of the AI boosters, there are a lot of people who are hesitant, or worse than hesitant, really kind of against it, and think that it's just a bad thing. So, long way of saying that I think the adoption is going to be slow. The other risk, I don't think Sam Altman is a good good financial manager. I think,
Mm.
the um I just don't trust him to keep the company solvent. And if his thing goes under, a lot of other deals will have trouble also. So,
Because you
um,
don't think he'll be able to raise enough capital to keep feeding the beast, or what do you think will
I
get
just
him
I
there?
just don't
I don't
think
get the
he
sense that they're spending so much from, like, an OpEx perspective. Like, it's not like they have it's not like they have 200,000 employees and it's bloated. So you think they're
well
not gonna be able to raise equity?
well, it's actually not based on sort of close analysis of the assets and liabilities of the company. It's based on reading a biography of Altman himself,
Mm,
and his father was a big believer in public-private partnerships that had very strange financial arrangements. And this biographer claims that, well, I mean, just look at the original, that
right.
this
It was
thing
very strange.
starts out as a nonprofit, now it's
Right.
becoming a profit. It has this same peculiarity to it, and I just I don't really trust it. I think, you know, maybe there's a CFO in there who's really solid and who really, it doesn't matter, Altman's just out there making deals and being the front of the company, and inside it's being run like a tight ship. But I th- I have this negative gut feel about that. So,
I
uh,
think it's possible. It certainly, obviously, the original structure was strange. I think it's possible that, uh I think it is I can't think of another example of a brand that became the name of a thing, right? Q-tip or Kleenex or something like that, but where it then just, like, up and vanished, right? The same
right.
way that Kleenex we don't say like pass me a tissue. Many people say pass me a Kleenex, regardless
Right.
of the brand, right?
Yeah, and Xerox this for
Xerox, that kind of thing, right? When do those things vent? I don't know of an example of one
yeah.
that's just gone away.
Well, yeah, so somebody will buy it for something, but let's say that the VCs value the company at 500 billion, and somebody says, "Well, the ChatGPT brand I'll buy, but I'll buy it for 20 billion." And then
Mm.
that's $480 billion that's vanished.
It's possible. I mean, that'd be a lot of equity value to evaporate. I think there's a lot of folks who have so much riding on it that they'll do everything they can to prop that up in the meantime. I think to me, it's all going to depend on, can he continue to produce the model that people want to use, right? The switching cost is fairly low. So people say, okay, well, Gemini has the best model now. That's the best frontier model. And then next week it's Claude, and next week it's, as long as every 4 months or 6 months or whatever, however often they come out with a new release, it's ChatGPT that's the best thing. I think he'll stay in the conversation. But if he stops being able to compete with the product, that's when it starts to go bad. And I don't
Yeah.
know if that's, I have no visibility into that one way or another.
Yeah, well, so far, I would say based on experience so far, he's got the ability to raise the talent and direct the talent to keep it at the frontier.
I mean, if we see this widespread adoption of AI, on the one hand, that grows productivity, and that should be good for lowering interest rates. On the other hand, it may drive positive economic growth, which would correlate with somewhat higher interest rates, or a higher natural interest rate, I
Yeah.
guess. So I don't really have a great point of view on, maybe you do, which
No,
one
I
of those
don't.
is likely to win out. And does adoption mean rates go down, or does adoption mean rates go up? My instinct is that rates go down, but it's a very loosely held instinct, and very weakly held.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think you could make the argument either way that the um that if adoption requires lots and lots of capital investment of some sort, then it that puts pressure on interest rates. But um yeah, I don't know.
It's a great question. I don't know. I was trying to force the issue and come up with a some prediction market that we can make here to bet on, so that we can do this again in 2027, and have some reason to pick one way or another if there's a winner. Should we maybe it's Iran? Do we think it's do you have a strong point of view on whether we're going to attack Iran in the next month?
I don't have a strong point of view, but I think the for the US, the costs probably exceed the benefits under most scenarios. It might be tremendously beneficial to the people of Iran and to their neighbors, but I think if Mr. Trump is as much of a nationalist as he claims to be, uh, but that's a very amateur opinion. So if I the um, so an interesting bet for next year would have to do with something with like the white collar world, like
Mm.
how different the white collar world will look. Um, will we could do something on the will college graduates have a higher or lower unemployment rate a year from now? New college graduates a higher or lower unemployment rate than they do today. It could be lower just because they're the ones who are learning how to use it. I mean, faculty be damned that the students are on top of it, and there are plenty of students who are way more on top of it at UATX than I am. You know, all there are several of them who are getting their Mac Minis so that they have a burner computer that can put on OpenClaw. You know, so they're just out there doing it, and when they graduate, they may be you know way in more demand than their professors. So it
When
could
I
go
worked at
that way.
Microsoft, I remember we'd go. This is almost 10 years ago now, and we'd go to one customer after another and talk to them about digital transformation. These were huge enterprises, the biggest financial institutions in the world, and the topic at the time was not AI; it was cloud adoption. It was moving all of their data and their applications to the cloud. And what we found at one company after another was that the IT department was dragging their heels for a couple of different reasons. The biggest one was they were scared of it and they saw it as, well, if we do this, it's going to put me out of a job. And so we're going to drag our heels and say, this is a security risk, or like that was always the excuse, right? We haven't finished our security review. I think that was one issue. The other issue was that a lot of these guys, they were used to being, like even a guy who's like the managing director in the IT department, he's usually like the managing director of email. Like he's not, it's like he's the managing director of making sure that everyone has like a BlackBerry that works. And then you suddenly say like, hey, are you ready to deploy all of your applications to the cloud? And it's like, I don't even know what that is. What we found was that there was this very significant movement inside these companies of what we called shadow IT, where the central IT departments were moving way too slowly, and it was the individuals, the young professionals who were like, I can't deal with this. They'd open up an AWS account or a Microsoft Azure account. They charge it on their own credit card or corporate card, and then they just build projects themselves. They build applications themselves because they said, I can't wait for, so and so to approve all of this on a company wide basis. It's just taking way too long. And I think there's an echo there in what you're talking about, where there's some, I don't know if Luddites is the right word for it, but there's like folks who are dragging their heels on this, and the individuals are just going to do it themselves. You know, be damned what the older folks say.
Yeah. In which case, they may be so from a traditional perspective, you say, well, I'm not going to hire this junior person at Goldman Sachs because I can ask ChatGPT to do their work. But then you hire them not to do the work that they used to be able to do, but to innovate and
Hmm.
show the company how to really use AI.
Hmm. I would, uh, on that question of will employment rates amongst recent college graduates be higher or lower in 12 months, I would guess higher. I think that just for the simple reason that we talked about earlier, like if you have an asset that has a 10% return on capital now, and now you can get a 20% return on capital out of it, you're going to buy a lot more of that asset because it's now suddenly twice as productive. And I think you're going to see that with talented professionals, that they're going to be so much more productive that people are going to want to hire way more of them, and we're more likely to have a labor shortage than the opposite.
Okay,
So,
interesting perspective. Well, I find it somewhat convincing, but for the sake of argument, I'll take the opposite. I'll take
fair enough.
the employment rate going down for the recent
Fair
college
enough.
graduates.
And
And if it is down, it'll be because of the college's failure to adapt,
that's a possibility.
not because of the young people themselves.
Do you have before we part, I'll let you go, but do you have a World Series prediction or a major baseball prediction for the coming year?
Major baseball prediction. Um,
Could be a World Baseball Classic prediction.
yeah. So Um, I don't want to just pick the Dodgers, right? That would be, it's like,
It's so easy, but
that's like picking General Motors or something. It's just, no. Prediction.
the Dodgers really are the easy one. I mean, it's like hard to bet against them, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, I'll do an off the wall one. Not even sure I believe it, but the Reds make it to the World Series.
Wow, that's a good one.
Wait,
I
they have to
mean,
get past the Dodgers to do that. Never mind. The Reds make it to the
make it to the
finals.
pennant. Yeah.
Yeah, the Reds win their division. How about that?
I mean, I think that's a good look. Ellie De La Cruz is one of the most exciting players you can watch in the major leagues. So I could totally see that. I was going to say an interesting way to frame it would be which teams will outperform their win percentage from last year. And that way it's not just about, you know, are the Dodgers going to win the World Series? But maybe who's going to outperform. And the Reds are a good one, though. I don't know how many games did the Reds win last year.
I think they were a tad below 500. I think
Were they really? I thought. Let's see if we can find 2025 Major League Baseball standings. Let's see what we can find here. National League. Let's see if we can find the standings for the end of the year. It's a
let's
great,
go to
great
Baseball
question.
Reference.
Here we go. So I've got baseball reference. So the Reds ended up with a 512 win-loss percentage. They were 83-79. They came in third in the division, right? Because they had the Brewers and the Cubs to contend with, both of whom were great last season. So they were just over 500.
All right, so my wild prediction is they win over 90.
Win over 90. And the Now that I'm looking at this, I would say one interesting one I'll predict is the Mets had the same number of wins as the Reds last year. The Mets were 83-79. So I would take the Mets to outperform how they did last year. I would say the Mets will win 90 games or more this year. So that would
Okay,
be
so I'll take the outlandish view that the Reds will win more than the Mets this year.
the Reds to win more than the Mets. All right, I like that one. That's a good one. The Reds versus the Mets head to head. That's a good one. Um, I think that they must play each other during the season, right? There's got to be
Yeah,
at least
sure.
like 6 games. So uh, it'll be interesting to see how that season series goes. Well, thank you for your time. It was great talking with you again, as always. Thanks for all of your incredible writing, which is always a delight to read, and your baseball predictions. And I'm excited to read more about how things are going in Austin. And I hope that in 2026 you will publish more baseball content, because I think your baseball content is incredibly insightful stuff.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. Well, that would be fun.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Well, take care. Have a great night.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks, Arnold.
Good night. Thanks.
Good night. Bye bye.